Hello and welcome to an episode of Jacob's House of Rock. And today I've got a guitar review for you guys. So we're going to be doing the full proper demo and review of the Harley Benton SC-550 guitar. So let me just turn my amp off and we'll get started. Alright guys, so what you were just hearing then is this little guitar playing through my SC-550 little valve combo that I have from Laney amplifiers. I'll just show you guys that. It's mic'd with an SM57, so that's what I was using right there for the demo, and we might do some more demos later on in the video. We'll see how it pans out. But for now, let's go through, a little overview of this instrument and its features. So if you guys saw my unboxing of this thing, you'd know that this is basically a sort of Les Paul type copy that we get from Harley Benton Guitars, which is the in-house brand of an online music retailer that specializes in music equipment, recording stuff, and guitars, called Thomann, and they're located in Germany, and they have a big warehouse and they sell stuff online all over the world, but mainly in Europe. But somehow I managed to get this thing to arrive all the way in Australia. So yeah, let's go over this thing. So I bought this because I wanted a Les Paul type guitar. I'd recently also got the Artist Guitars LP59, which is a very good Les Paul copy, and I'm going to be doing comparisons between those two in future videos. But for now, let's just go over this thing on its own. So you can see, aside from some minor differences like the headstock and the body shape here, as well as around the little joint here and the shape of the neck, from a distance, this thing looks very convincing as a Les Paul. It's got all this sort of various features and hardware that you'd expect to see on a Les Paul. Beautiful finish, by the way, is another thing about this guitar. They really outdid themselves on this faded tobacco burst, or whatever it's called. There's also they have a really nice they come in two colors as far as I know. This one, the faded tobacco burst, and a paradise flame burst, which is similar to this, but it doesn't have the smoky edge, and it has much more the flame maple is a little bit more striped. But yeah, I chose this one because I thought it looked really nice, and I'm really happy about how it turned out in hand. So looks great. Overall, this was a B stock one. When you buy from Thomann, they sell some as A and B stocks. So like they have the main full priced ones, which are the ones that are the best quality, and usually it's just the only difference is the visual of like whether they have cosmetic damage or not. But this one, I got the B stock because it was a bit cheaper, and apparently it would have some cosmetic damage, but I don't really see any, so that's a big bonus because I think they did a really great job with this thing. Going over what it's made of, it has a flame maple veneer on a maple cap, and the rest of the body is mahogany, which is really nice. That's what an actual Les Paul is made of. This has a rosacer fretboard, so it looks like rosewood, but it's actually a type of treated maple, which they've been using on all their guitars with a dark fretboard recently, because of some issues with transporting rosewood internationally because of conservation issues with rosewood trees. So it's a pretty good wood, works very well, looks very nice. It's a very uniform wood, but it's a little dull looking, unfortunately. So maybe when I oil it, it will liven it up a bit. But you get what you see on camera with that. But I like it; it works really well. We've got two Roswell pickups. Roswell is like the brand that they've been using quite a lot of recently. They used to use Wilkinson pickups in these things, but recently they changed over to Roswell. We'll get into these pickups a bit later, but I have mixed opinions on these. They are Alnico 5, proper Alnico humbucking pickups, so that's all nice. But sound-wise, we'll get to that. We have some regular sort of vintage style Clouson tuners in this like weird vomit green plastic color on the tips here. they work pretty well. I've had no real issues with these. I would have liked these to have been locking tuners, but you know, you don't always get what you wish for. But you know, I might change these one day, or we'll see. And the cool thing is, this guitar is made in Vietnam, so they're sort of better quality instruments than making at Thomann at the moment, and Harley Benton, I mean, are made in Vietnam, which is really nice. So it's not made in China. I think it has a bone nut, or if not, it has a synthetic bone nut, something like that. It's sort of a... It doesn't quite feel like bone to me, but it feels better than a cheap sort of plastic, so that's nice. You get that sort of Harley Benton, their own sort of custom headstock on this thing, which is probably the most jarring thing compared to an actual Les Paul visually. Personally, I'm not actually a fan of this headstock. So I don't know, it looks a little better in person than it did in some of the photos, but my main issue is actually the top of the headstock here. It feels, the design they went for, because they couldn't, you know, use the Gibson one, seems like a little bit of a cop-out. Like they were trying to sort of do like an open book thing, but they made it so subtle and they added this little bump here, and it's almost straight across, but it's kind of not, so it just looks really rough and really indecisive in its sort of in the cuts they did here, and it's, I don't know, it doesn't quite look really good, and that's kind of unfortunate because the rest of this guitar is really pretty, like especially this veneer here, and yeah, the rest of it is this really dark red mahogany. You can kind of, oh, there we go, got some light on it, so you can see. I'm not sure if this is how many pieces this body is made of. It looks like a single piece, but it might be made of two. I don't really see any lines, but in person this thing looks almost like almost black. It's very dark red, but since we got some light on it on film, you guys can kind of see the wood grain there. And let's have a look at the neck. So neck is kind of similar. Do we have a scarf joint there? It is so hard to tell because again the lacquer is so dark, very dark red, that I can't really tell. But yeah, I can't even tell what the how they made the neck. If you guys can kind of see on the video here, maybe that'll help you. But whoops. But the materials are nice. However, I will note that despite this being what appears to be a solid mahogany body on this guitar, it actually feels surprisingly light. And now I think the reason that is because I believe there's some like sound pockets that they added in a couple of places in this body, so it really lightens it, especially considering that my artist guitar's LP59 here feels much heavier, and it looks like it's about the same thickness of wood, if not less, even by a little bit. So this one is very light, and yeah, so I'm gonna do a comparison between these two in another video, so I won't get into it too much. But this one, I will just say, feels very much like a Les Paul, whereas the Harley Benton feels very different to me. So let's get into the playability. It's actually really good on this guitar. Harley Benton have really high levels of quality control on their guitars, which is really good. Probably the best thing about them is they generally have very positive reviews about the fretwork and the setup on their guitars as they get them, you know, sent out to people. And this guitar is no exception. The fretboard is perfect pretty much. I get almost no buzz. Get almost no buzz on the neck, and it, you know, feels great to play on. The strings are quite low, which is really nice. If you can kind of have a look there. Sorry, this review is kind of all over the place. But yeah, also the frets looked really polished, so hopefully my camera will go in focus for you guys. So the frets came out of the box really nice and polished, really well set up, and just beautiful to play on. So that's probably this guitar's best-selling feature, and the best thing about it. Because to get a fretwork done on an instrument, especially one at this price, you might end up paying more than the instrument to get the fretwork done by a local luthier, or you have to get all the necessary paraphernalia to do it yourself, as well as that takes a lot of time and effort. And I'm probably going to get into it eventually, because I tried looking up some of the local luthiers. This is for doing fretwork, and they're not pretty, so I'd have to figure out how to do it myself, because I have some guitars that could probably use that. But this one, that's perfect. So playability is amazing, all up the neck, the intonations, all nice. I have no complaints with that way. Let's get on to the feel of this guitar. So like I said, it's still a very hefty guitar. It's just compared to other Les Pauls that it feels light. Compared to a Strat, this thing's fucking heavy actually, but compared to an Les Paul, this one feels oddly light. And that kind of translates into the sound as well. So I don't know entirely how much of it is the pickups, like I was saying, but we'll get into that. But the feel of this guitar is very different from Les Paul. The neck profile, which is sort of the shape of the back of the neck here, is actually very flat. It has a very slim, flat feeling neck, whereas a Les Paul has a much wider one, a very meaty neck, which feels great to play on. But this one feels great to play on in a different way. So it's a really, people call it like a shredder neck, so you can really move up and down it pretty fast and get all around it really well, but it has less sort of grip for you to really hang on to like a bigger Les Paul one. It really depends what you're after and what you prefer. A lot of people love this kind of neck. I'm kind of undecided. I really like these sort of slim necks as well, but with a Les Paul guitar, I actually really love the one on the Artist Guitar one, probably a bit better than this one, because it does feel really sort of chunky, and it feels very Les Paul-like, and it's just great for that sort of hard rock stuff. But for like shredding and like really fast stuff, especially if you want to get right up into the upper register here. If you want to do that, this one's perfect, especially with this sort of curved down heel joint here. So feel-wise, really lovely guitar. And yeah, like that's the best thing about this guitar is the fretwork, the playability, and the feel. Visually, like I was saying, this part looks really good. I'm not totally sold on the exact sort of changes they made to the sort of Les Paul shape up in this area, because little wave here is sort of slightly this sort of dives down here where it should be going straight in like this, and then this one gets really pointy and sort of a little wider on this side than a normal Les Paul, which would have a more rounder one. And it doesn't, like, if for the untrained eye you wouldn't notice it, but once you see it, it's really hard to unsee. So that's a little something visually that I'm not too fond of. As well as, like I was saying, the fretboard material it's kind of dull looking. It's very, very uniform, so you don't really have any interesting grain in it, and it's kind of matte looking compared to the rest of this guitar, which is very glossy. So visually, those are the issues that I have a problem with this end. And like I was saying, the headstock is not pretty in my eyes. It's just awkwardly cut. These sort of shiny things, they could look nice if the rest of the headstock design is a little better, but my main issue is the top area here. They should have worked a little better to make this look a little more organic. I'd actually preferred them to, instead of going for a more classic Les Paul type design, slim the headstock up a little more at the top. That way, even though it sort of doesn't look like a classic Les Paul, if they're going to change it anyway, it would bring these tuners in a little more. So that way, when the strings are going down through the nut, you're not going to have string binding happening, because they'll be going through straight, as opposed to, sideways like they do on this guitar and on, actual Les Pauls. So they could have had the opportunity to make an even better headstock, kind of like this one. So if we look at my Samick Greg Bennett design Torino guitar here. You can see the headstock has far less um, width at the far end, so the tuner is kind of uh, more closer together at the top, so the strings go through a little bit more straight, and that helps eliminate string binding. Whereas this one, you can see they just go the G and the D strings kind of just bind at the nut, going right to the sides to get to those tuners. It's not the best, but it is what it is, and I haven't really had any tuning issues with it as yet. But you know, they could have improved the design there, especially with changing the headstock like this anyway. It's kind of, with Harley Benton guitars, I find it's really hit and miss on how good they look. Some look really beautiful, and then some kind of just have weird issues, like this ugly headstock compared to the rest of this guitar looking really beautiful. But yeah, that's pretty much my sort of issues with this thing. Other than that, I really like it. But my main sort of thing that I want to stress in this review is this does not feel like a Les Paul. It doesn't, the neck doesn't feel like a Les Paul. The pickups sound really sort of bright and tinny compared to like an actual Les Paul sound. They lack a little bit of that low end and mid range, I find. I mean, they still work in some applications. I actually find they're quite nice with really high gain, where you kind of need to have a bit of a high pass filter in there to roll off some of that low end, some muddiness. But they're really very different to all my other sort of pickups, actually. So personally, I'm not a big fan of these pickups, but you can make them work with certain things, and it really depends what you're looking for with your sound. And another thing that makes this guitar not really feel like a Les Paul is, you know, the hollow body sort of aspect of it. Kind of, you hear it when you're playing. It plays a little bit more, and perhaps that's affecting the sound that I'm talking about, the thinner sound of the pickups, is there's more resonance in the body and less of that sustain from having that weight there. And it does sort of come through in the pickups just a bit. So I kind of, the way it rings when you're holding it in your hand feels closer to a semi-hollow body guitar as opposed to a solid Les Paul design. So yeah, that's pretty much my review of this thing. Actually, I haven't gone over the hardware. The switch works well, but it's very loose. Like, you can just tap it really lightly and it will switch positions, whereas on some of my other guitars, like especially this Artist Guitars one, this one has a solid switch. Come on, really awkward in this review, but whatever. This one is just, you can't move it, but if you gotta press it. So this one is not gonna fling anywhere. If you're wanting one that can just sort of move easy, switch really swiftly between it, this one's for you, although it's not gonna hold positions if you tap it accidentally. Well, yeah, I'm going to do a little playthrough of this thing for you guys, and then I'll come back with my conclusion. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed those sounds coming out of this thing. Again, it was just my Laney combo over there that all the sounds coming through. Your mileage will vary depending on what amp you're using, how high you set the pickups, all sorts of stuff like that, what microphone you're using. I just use an SM57 because it's the most sort of standard guitar mic that's used by people, and it's pretty fairly inexpensive as far as decent microphones go. But let's get to my conclusions about this thing. So the main point I want to stress is this really isn't a substitute for a Les Paul. It actually feels and plays very differently. I don't think of this thing as a Les Paul. However, as an instrument, as a guitar itself, it's really well made. I have some, issues here and there, but especially as like a modding project, this thing is a killer guitar to start with. The main reason for that is the fretwork is impeccable on this thing. It has a beautiful finish on the body, so you just gotta love that. You can swap out the pickups really easy, change all the wiring. You can probably put in like a push-pull pod and all sorts of crazy stuff if you really wanted to. I would change out the tuners as well, maybe to some locking tuners, just because I can't be bothered. Since I've started using locking tuners, I really can't be bothered going back to these normal non-locking ones. And these ones don't look that pretty, especially just the sort of weird off-green color they chose for these plastic nubs at the end. So yeah, I would change the machine heads. Definitely would think of upgrading the pickups, just me personally, because I'm not, these could work, like, the neck pickup sounds pretty good for soloing because it's very bright, so you don't get the typical muddiness of a neck pickup, but you get sort of that woman tone that people talk about when you talk about neck pickups on a Les Paul. So you could keep this one, but I'd perhaps change the bridge pickup out for something. Wilkinson do good pickups. I'm going to be reviewing some Vanson sort of PAF style pickups soon. And of course the John Birch Heaven and Hell set pickups that I've got in my guitar that I was showing you earlier, the Torino. They're amazing, so definitely got a lot more bass to them than these, if that's what you're going after, so those are all great options. But yeah, my final thoughts about this thing is it's really great that Thomann and Harley Benton can put out an instrument like this at such a great price. It really would make beginner guitar players have such a great time learning to play on an instrument like this, and just us more intermediate players would have a blast just spending this much on a guitar, and especially one that plays so good, because with inexpensive guitars, the absolute main thing that they typically get wrong that is an actual issue. It's not the pickups, it's not the hardware, it's not even the the tuners or anything like that, although those are all great to change out and they're really easy to change out. But the main issue is always the fretwork and the neck, because if you have an instrument with a good neck, you can do anything to it pretty much, and it will still be an amazing instrument. It will still at least play good and feel good to play on, whether it's acoustically or through an amp or whatever. So I think this is a very worthwhile guitar. Whether it would be my go-to one if I had to choose it between this and the Artist one, I'm not going to spoil, although I think it's kind of self-evident the way I've been talking about the two guitars. But they're both great guitars, and this one is a really good option for you guys if you're after if you're totally happy with something that looks like this with this sort of headstock. So yeah, that's about it for this review. Keep on rocking, guys. Thanks for watching. Peace out. Bye.